my point of view as an educator, I would say that it's more common in certain areas because the parents are neurodivergent.
Right.
And if the parents have ADHD and a low income and struggle with staying in work and so on, they're going to live in lower income areas, and therefore the children are going to there's going to be more obvious kind of ADHD. So I definitely think it's related to socio-economic circumstances. And also the statistic that I do know is that 40% of people in prison have ADHD.
Welcome back to the channel. My name is Tristan Lowe. It's the Over 40s Fitness Podcast. My guest today is Rosie Elvin. Rosie, pleased to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Just to be clear, I've sort of spoke with Rosie on LinkedIn over the last couple of months, trying to get Rosie to come onto the show, of which she's graciously accepted. And we first met, did you say October last year?
I think it was September, October last year.
At Lincoln University. Yeah. And it was one of their open days they did on businesses and services in Lincoln.
Yeah.
And I think I was sat 2 or 3 rows from the front on one of their discussions, and you were sat next to one of your colleagues. The purpose of asking Rosie to come into the show is because Rosie deals with, I'm going to use that term loosely, deals with, works with, understands ADHD. All right, okay. Right, let's shoot from the top. All right, Rosie, tell us about yourself, and of course, let's start, now bearing in mind, it's obviously a huge subject, okay? I'd like you to treat me as if it's the first time I've ever heard about it. I've actually trained someone with ADHD before, so I've just scratched beneath the surface. Tell me about yourself.
So I'm Rosie Elvin. I left the University of Lincoln last year after 16 years of teaching, and I decided to pursue my business, ADHD FOCUS. So I've been developing this for a while, and it felt like the right time to move forward with it. So ADHD FOCUS deals with, I work with mainly late diagnosed adults with ADHD. So this tends to be people who have had some difficulties throughout their lives, but they didn't really know what was causing the difficulties. And then generally in their 30s, 40s, sometimes earlier, they found out about ADHD and pieced things together and realised that their struggles, but also their strengths, often are because of ADHD.
When you said late diagnosis or late adult diagnosis, what is there an age bracket when it's classed as adult or late adult diagnosis?
I guess it's post 18. There's often at school, children who get picked up at school is often quite young. It's often boys because they are disrupting the class, and it's unacceptable behaviour, or which might lead to some aggressive behaviour towards others, no focus. So it's quite obviously the stereotypical view of ADHD. So they're offered medication, sometimes medicated as children.
And who prescribes? Is the medication prescribed by a psychiatric nurse or a specialist that just specialises in ADHD? So
they would be diagnosed by a paediatrician. And then
in the school or outside the school?
I think it's outside of the school. I'm not particularly an expert with children. But with ADHD, it's generally not dealt with by the GPs because they're not specialised in it. It's often a psychiatrist who would diagnose and medicate if that's the right route to go for the children. And then often the people that don't get diagnosed are the ones who aren't disruptive in school because it doesn't get flagged up. So so this can go on throughout you might have struggles, personal struggles in school, but because it's not really having an effect on anybody else, it's not really seen as being a problem. Whereas the struggles might, and particularly for girls and women, they're often diagnosed with anxiety, depression, eating disorders, bipolar, and if the GP doesn't know anything about ADHD, that it's not really a go-to thing. And then when they get older, they start to read about neurodivergence. So like autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD and so on. And they start to piece things together and realise maybe it wasn't depression or it wasn't bipolar. So there's not much information about it for people.
When you mentioned about, say, the age of 18 and above, because for me, age 54, 18 is very, very young. And if someone's at school, further education, colleges, universities, diploma schools, they could still be disruptive in a class. When you mentioned about how it's often the case with young boys or young men, whether they have been diagnosed or undiagnosed, there's also a possibility I'll throw a guess out. Would there be a statistic out there to show that is more common in inner cities or low-income areas? I mean, could a boy that's raised in the finest schools in Middle England, goes to a private school, with £30,000 a year fees, compared to a boy who comes from a single-parent family who lives in rough ghettos in London or Nottingham? Is there a disparity, or are they? Is it easier to see on a boy in a school, in a mixed, gladiator academy of a school in high crime parts of London, compared to a boy who goes to a private education school where the fees are £30,000 a year, like Harrow or Eton or Arundel?
I think with ADHD, it is so linked with socio-economic circumstances. I don't know the statistics to quote, but I know that there's areas in Lincolnshire in particular, and in the UK where it's more heavily diagnosed. And in I'm not a sociologist or a psychologist, but from my point of view as an educator, I would say that it's more common in certain areas because the parents are neurodivergent. And if the parents have ADHD and are low income, struggle with staying in work and so on, they're going to live in lower income areas, and therefore the children are going to there's going to be more obvious kind of ADHD. So I definitely think it's related to socio-economic circumstances. And also the statistic that I do know is that 40% of people in prison have ADHD. And that, I think, was my turning point of why I wanted to do something about it, because I think all of the kind of late diagnosed adults, a lot of us have moved on with good careers and so on, and sort of reasonably successful people. But I think we can all identify, if we didn't have that parental support, school support, the channeling of energy, if we didn't have that, we could all be in prison.
It's not a vacation I'd like to take though, so all right, what's okay, so the book you've got there, tell us about the book.
So this book, Driven to Distraction, this was my second book I read on ADHD, and I first found out about ADHD, it was probably around about 8 years ago now. And I did an online test, generic online test.
For yourself,
For myself. And I thought, I've scored very well on this test.
Is it a test that you don't want to be scoring high in though? Do you want to score low?
Yeah, probably best to score low. So I did very well. And I thought, well, that's an explanation. And I hadn't really found an explanation before, as I wanted to know how my brain worked, and no one could really explain it, to be honest. And I thought, okay, well, that's an explanation, but I didn't really, I thought, at that time I was like 38-ish, and I just thought, well, what difference would it make for having a diagnosis? And then I read some things about entrepreneurs and ADHD, and I realised that actually the things that I found easy and I was really good at, like networking and bringing people together and thinking quickly and things like that, are actually ADHD traits.
Oh, right.
And I didn't realise that.
I better take the test. Okay.
That does happen a lot when I speak to people.
Well, you can see everyone's eyes thinking, okay, it's like when we talk about posture. Everyone does that. I'm doing it now. Okay, sorry.
Because you only, with ADHD, you really only hear about the deficits, you know, the things that, like, the test just highlights how rubbish how rubbish I am at leaving my phone at home, like I've done today. You know, missing appointments and things like that. But the test doesn't really talk about any of the strengths. So I read a book called Faster Than Normal by Peter Shankman that I don't have because I lent it to someone. And that was a story of being an entrepreneur and becoming an entrepreneur. And I just couldn't believe it. And that was when I actually thought, I think I want to have the diagnosis, because if I do have a brain like that, then I want to pursue this business. And then this book, Driven to Distraction, was the second book I read.
Who wrote it?
Ed Hallowell, who's the kind of king of ADHD.
Let me guess, he's American.
Yeah.
Why? Why is he not from Bognor or from Birmingham? Why are they all from California or New York?
It's more sort of popular, in America.
It's a bigger country.
And I think there's a link there with America, actually, because there's a lot of people that went to America like my Irish uncle went to America and sort of did lots of different kind of jobs, set up a house on I think it was Pismo Beach or something like that, had 10 kids. So it takes a kind of certain brain to actually decide to do that. Anyway, that's going off.
We're digressing there, you're on.
But the Driven to Distraction was really good because he's a psychologist, so it's written from a that kind of academic perspective, but really accessible for everybody. And he talks about all of his clients, all kind of different clients, which I pretty much resonated with every single one of them in a different way. And I kept putting it down and just going, oh my God.
So you've essentially got a page turner.
It was brilliant. So I go back to it all the time and I refer it to my clients. He does a podcast as well, which is great.
Excellent.
So I like the pace of it. And it's all just, it makes you feel, when you hear him speak, it makes you feel just accepted and like you're in the right, I'm doing the right thing. I'm in the right space.
Is there a possibility that someone, John or Jill, whoever they are, from England to America, we can't uninvent the internet, Rosie. It's here to stay, whether we like it or not. We can't uninvent the internet. We can't uninvent a good book, and we can't uninvent things like YouTube and access to information. Is there a possibility that someone could self-diagnose without actually seeking professional psychiatric help from either a psychologist or a psychiatrist or someone who specialises in nutrition, which can play a part in many disorders as well? Is it possible for someone to do that and say, well, I've ticked enough boxes, let's say I'm just guessing 10 boxes, I've ticked 9 out of 10, because they're looking for it. So they could possibly, even if someone was to tick, I bet if I took the same test as you, I've got no idea, but there'll be, how many boxes are there? How many questions? Is it 10, 20, 100?
So on the online tests, it's obviously shorter than the psychiatric test.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know. Yeah, probably about 20.
Okay, so if there was 20 questions on there and I went and looked at it tonight or tomorrow morning, this is before Arsenal play at the weekend. Right, I'm just kidding. And I went on it, would there be things on it where I'd say, oh yeah, that's me. Because, I'm dealing with work, I deal with home, I deal with my interests, vinyl, sport, travel, and my attention can be distracted quite quickly. And I say to myself, well, that's my fault, because whilst I'm watching TV, I've had my phone in my hand. Whilst I'm eating, I've got the music playing. So, or if I'm dealing with a particular client, I have to actually be able to recycle things. If I've got a guy coming in who's coming to train with us for weight management, the next client could come in and it's nothing to do with weight management. So my attention has to be switched from one to the other. And I have to do that sometimes 5 or 6 times a day. And what I find as well is that can happen outside of work as well. I can be doing something like cooking, prepping food, but I can't just prep my dinner. I've got to have another distraction at the same time. The TV's on, music's on. Would I find out of those 20 those boxes, would I find that I fit into 5 of them, 10 of them, 20? Or would I say, no, there's not a single one there that I find myself in? I wouldn't want to self-diagnose. How does that work? Can someone self-diagnose?
Yeah, you can self-diagnose. So it's all about impact, how much of an impact those things have on you.
Okay, yeah.
So for some people, it might, for example, binge eating, let's say, it might, eating through boredom and, that kind of stuff. That can have a huge impact on your life. And if it seems like the symptoms align with ADHD, then that would feel like it'd be worth exploring.
Right.
I think you can have all of these ADHD traits, but doesn't have too much of an impact on your life.
Yeah.
It all works really well for you. So it's sort of not a disorder then. I think when it's really, for example, the people that are ending up in prison through impulsive behaviour and so on, that has a huge impact on their lives.
Yeah, of course.
And I think the way that I look at it is it's a set of symptoms that can be managed, and once you know that those symptoms are connected, you can work on how you need to manage your symptoms. But if we don't know these things exist, we're trying to search for what's wrong with us.
Yeah, okay.
If it's having an impact on our lives,
yeah.
if that makes sense.
That sounds like quite a human thing to do though. When you mentioned about eating disorders, if we make up a name, John or Jill, who've got an eating disorder, how is an eating disorder classed? Okay, well if someone has habitually, over a space of time, eaten their way to a high percentage of dangerously high levels of body fat or visceral fat and or body weight on the musculoskeletal frame, that's physiology. They have physiologically changed their body. And if that's come from binge eating due to trauma, crisis, or ADHD, or a form of bipolar, then is it that person's fault that they've done that to their body? Or if they're diagnosed correctly by a professional later on in life, are they then given metaphorically given a clean slate? It wasn't your fault, John or Jill, that you binged over a space of 4 or 5 years to a point of physiological poor health. Can that 21, 22, 25-year-old who is now dangerously overweight through binge eating, are they given a clean slate and I'll use a phrase, it might not be the right phrase, but I'll use it for now. Are they given a get-out clause because you had trauma early on in life, and therefore, or could there be a situation where it's none of that? They've not got a disorder. They've not got what they have now got though is physiological disease. They've got dis-ease. So somebody with type 2 diabetes, someone with musculoskeletal disorders, cardiovascular poor health, upper respiratory syndrome problems, cardiac problems, that person has now physically got poor health. Now, is there a possibility that they that had that diagnosis, being diagnosed early? You mentioned about children in school. If that's diagnosed and treated early with professional assistance and professional advice and some form of prescribed medication, do you think that would have a definite stopping point, or would it at least delay the onset of that compulsive disorder?
I think the sort of research shows that if a child is diagnosed and treated at school, whether that's medication or through just support systems, they do better in life.
Okay.
I think it provides an explanation, so it's not just something that you don't understand why you're doing it.
Those that climb
it's
need
a very
to.
neurodivergent community.
the phrase or the term you give, that neurodivergent. When did that term come around?
That term, oh gosh, I did learn when this term was
to the nearest
coined.
year.
I can't remember. I think it was the 1990s.
Okay, yeah.
But I should remember that because that's part of the training that I give.
Oh,
But I always
yeah.
brush up.
We can't remember everything.
No. So everybody is neurodiverse,
Right.
meaning that everybody, everyone's brain works differently. But neurodivergence means that we are different from the majority.
Right. Okay.
And the way that I see it is, it's an issue with the environment and society. Not that really there's anything wrong with our brains, but because we're expected to behave in a certain way, learn in a certain way, socialise in a certain way, then when we don't, we stand out from the crowd, and then it's seen that there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. Okay.
Whereas actually, it's society that needs to learn to be more accommodating and accepting for individuals.
Is there a visual tell? Is there could you walk past someone in the street on a busy crowded day in Nottingham or Lincoln, and is there a visual tell of someone who may have that?
Do you know what? No, I can tell if someone's got ADHD.
Have you done it on me yet? Be honest, that's what you're here for. I'm all ears.
I mean, it's something that I wouldn't ever, I mean, unless you're asking, maybe there is, maybe you are neurodivergent in some way. Yeah.
Right, okay, so what have you seen in me?
It's the,
sorry, I've got very thick skin, it's like that.
Well, the fact that you run this space is a massive amount of business owners run and are neurodivergent because the 9 to 5 doesn't quite fit, and we want to do something ourselves and so on. And the way that people communicate as well, that you can. People who are ADHD particularly, you can have several different sort of conversations going on, big tangents, and then come right the way back. Right. And we're happy to just slip back into that first conversation.
Oh, gotcha. When you say they could have a big tangent, do you mean someone could actually visibly, vocally, body language as well? You call it a tangent. Where I'm from, they say throwing a paddy, but we can't use that phrase now.
Do you mean tantrum?
Yeah, if someone goes off on a tangent.
No, so I was thinking going off on a tangent where you start on one subject and then, like I started talking about America, which wasn't really anything to do with the question. So we do that quite a lot, but I think I am mostly quite aware of it. When I'm around other neurodivergent people, I know that it's fine to do that, because if someone wants to go back to that first point, they'll just bring us back to the first point. And the tantrums, I mean, with ADHD as well, there's often a lack of self-regulation. So there can be big emotional swings, especially if we're burnt out and exhausted and we haven't got that capacity. You can sort of snap at people without really meaning to. And I think with ADHD, the kind of research strongly suggests that it's to do with dopamine levels in your body. So our dopamine is quite low, and we need to boost it. So this morning I did a 6k run.
Excellent.
So that's.
What was your time?
Did you time? I did, but it was we went as a group.
Oh, okay.
And, 3 of us, and it was along the West Common, so it was quite so I was trying to do it a bit slower because. I'm training for a 10k.
Yeah, super.
So that's going to have massively boosted my dopamine for the day. I know that I have the ability to sort of hyperfixate on things as well, which is often my business. So I'll really get into something like doing some stuff on my website, and I could just sit there for hours and hours and hours and hours.
Is that a bad thing?
It's something that I need to manage because I've got kids, and if I'm burnt out, when I need to pick them up from school, and we've got all the stuff that we need to do after school. I'm not going to be in a good place mentally. I want to be present for them. So I know that I have to be quite strict with that. Before I had kids, I would literally just work,
because you could.
Sometimes, there was no massive impact.
Well, having children, I've not got children. I'm an uncle to 3. I'm a godfather to 3 as well. And I've been around children since I was in my late 20s, ex-girlfriend, and so the parenting itself is a full-time job. I mean, mentally and emotionally, and I'm just saying from what I've seen, and I've got brothers and sisters who've got children as well, and that in itself must be a task for you to juggle. Did you mention earlier on off camera that you got 2 boys?
Yeah, 2 boys.
Yeah, and of course there's the management of, because you've essentially got 2 other people. They're your sons.
Yeah, responsible for
but they are other people that you're still responsible for in 100 different ways. That must take some work to be able to for you to be able to sort of categorize or put into separate departments, mentally and physically and emotionally, and of course time-wise, for you to focus on you yourself as Rosie, and as mother, and as business, someone who works in business in your field, and talking to which you mentioned that that you've been working with or in Nottingham capacity in one.
I've been teaching at Nottingham Trent University part-time.
How'd you find it there?
Lovely, great uni, really nice. So I've been going there 2 days a week, and now I'm assessing.
So you come home from Nottingham, so you've got best part of an hour's drive?
So I go on the train.
Oh, do you? Yeah. I studied in Nottingham. I studied to be a sports massage therapist back in 2008 in Nottingham. And I remember I used to drive from Retford to Nottingham each day, really early in the day to beat the traffic. But I can remember then when I was only 37, I'd be driving back after a day's study and a day's practical, and I'm mentally exhausted. Then I've got an hour's drive back to get home. And I didn't have 2 children to then ring, I had to do my revision at night. And I thought that was hard then. But for you to do that in Nottingham, then come back to Lincoln, all right, granted it's on the train, but you can't miss that train. We've not got the underground here, have we? You miss it.
They go every hour. And my husband works at the university, so we sort of manage that when I'm in Nottingham, and but I think that this is a kind of a key point for women who have realised that it might be ADHD after they've had kids, because I think the responsibility of children, like you say, it's huge. And then there's all the admin on top of that. So any club they do, all the school admin, parties, play dates, all that kind of stuff. And it often falls on the mother. And you can distribute it, between your family, but we are often the ones that get have to sort that out. So there's a lot of mental administration, and
of course,
if that's a struggle, the organisation, then that can could just lead to burnout.
Of course it can.
And that's often the sign of something else, because, and also when I find as well the clubs that I do with the kids, it's often parents that are, there's this lifeguard training club up at Yarborough. I was like, oh my God, my son will love that. Why am I giving myself more more stuff to sort out? But I was like, no, he's going to love it. It sounds great. He could be a lifeguard part-time when he's 16.
Everything's so great until it's not.
And then it's like, actually, that means another, I've got to drive him there, and then he's got to go to Scouts. So my husband's really excellent with just saying no, that's too much, capacity's full. Whereas with ADHD, and also I think it's, you don't want to miss out on anything.
Is it possible, when you mentioned about the capacity is full, and whether you realise it or your husband realises it, as long as someone does, the art of saying no. I had a client, I still got a particular client, and he did very well in business and very well in family as well, because to me they're mutually exclusive, but there's parity between them in some way. They're quite important. I know the guy personally. He actually said to me years ago, the art of saying no, and I'm still learning to get better at saying no. because when I say yes, it has more it resonates more. With that, with you talking about getting the kids in certain clubs, and you know the fact you've got to be responsible for the driving, picking up, taking them up, and coming up with different ideas. You mentioned about a life-saving club or whatever. That'll be great. And I've learned everything's great until it's not.
Yeah.
Until it's not great. Until your boy thinks, I'm bored of this now, Mum. Find me something else. But surely there's such a time when boys or girls become more independent. They have an independent thought as well, which brings me to, would there be some point when you look for diagnosis, not for diagnosis, but the signs in your two boys, because they're still boys, and now at the age of, by the time they're 13, certainly 17 or 18, they're going to be packed full of testosterone. Yeah, that's physiology again, and we can't, you know, there's no reason that anyone should want to actually stop that or actually deplete that. You know, boys, young men, and some women as well, we are naturally built to travel, explore, build, and destroy. Yeah, that's how we are. You know, our biology is to go and get things done and then come back. We're built like that. That's thousands of years of biology. But obviously, in today's society, whether it be workplace, education, the home, or out on the street, there are 101 reasons to actually bring that sense of exploration, or that sense of wanting to understand, take things apart physically and mentally, and then maybe put them back together again. Is there a possibility, I always like to ask, and it's not there is there. Is there a possibility that somewhere in the UK or the USA or further afield, that a professional can misdiagnose a 14-year-old boy or 23-year-old man, misdiagnose, as in that boy, that young man has got all the traits of ADHD, but what it is, it's just packed full of testosterone, and that person wants to climb, break things, put things back together, understand how things work, or they are so short-term preoccupied with different things, they can't concentrate on one thing. Does that mean then, he's got ADHD? Or could it not be? Could it just not be he's not sleeping enough? He's not eating enough of the correct food? Could that happen? Could they be given a diagnosis or a title, but they're actually not?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of debate about is ADHD, there's research papers that say ADHD is diagnosed, there's research that says it's massively underdiagnosed, particularly in women.
Yeah,
because like in my age, I mean, not many people were really diagnosed with ADHD when I was younger, or they would be at a different school.
Yeah.
But you know, it would be so obvious. But no, you know, girls just were not even looked at.
I'd never heard of that when I was young.
So I think it's around about 5% of boys are diagnosed with ADHD, but it's only like 0.8% of girls or something.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that they don't have it. And I think one of the key things is with ADHD, it's often the mental hyperactivity.
Yeah.
So you're just constantly thinking from the moment you wake up.
Yeah.
It's like a switch goes on.
Yeah.
And not like a slow build.
Not a dimmer.
It's like,
not a dimmer switch.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the more that you manage your the more I do exercise, yoga, meditation,
Excellent.
those kind of things.
Yeah.
The quieter my brain is. I spoke to someone yesterday from the Noisy Brain, which is such a great.
What's that?
So it's a great website for musicians and sharing stories about mental health.
The Noisy Brain, is that is that an online platform?
Yes, it's an online platform and an app.
Right.
And we had a chat yesterday, and that phrase, the noisy brain, is great because I had a noisy brain, but I just spent my whole life trying to not have a noisy brain, rather than understanding why my brain was like that.
Yeah.
So I can't remember how we got here.
Well, that's you
the misdiagnosis. Yeah, and I think, I think it's quite a rigorous process with the diagnosis.
Sure. Yeah.
So you would like to think that there were multiple areas in that person's life where they were being affected by what could be the ADHD symptoms.
Yeah. There's so many factors then that someone who's paid to, a professional who's paid to diagnose, or talking of paid to diagnose, I looked into it actually, just you know, just out of ignorance really, and I looked at Harley Street practice, and they charge £250 to £500 an hour.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, granted, a psychiatric expert that works on Harley Street, it kind of comes with the title.
Yeah.
You know, they've had years of study and they're still learning themselves. You know, I imagine if you're going to Harley Street for a psychiatric psychosis, it could be for dental treatment, like these guys that go and have their hair transplants in Harley Street. The fact you're going to London, then going to Harley Street, it's almost going to cost more. But I looked at it and thought, £250 to £500 an hour for the initial consultation. The therapist within that practice, they start at £250. The head psychiatric doctor starts at £500 an hour. Now, is that fair? Yeah, that they are charging that when you could have a man or a woman in London, we'll say in London, who lives quarter of an hour from Harley Street, half an hour, who can't afford that profession, that level of professionalism. So where do they go then?
I think this is what's really obvious about the community, that it's if you can't afford it. I mean, the waiting list is years
on the NHS. Years.
Yeah, years. So if if a teenager at school even wants to go onto the waiting list, they might be waiting 2 years. Up to, some people have said it's 6 years.
Really?
Wow. So then, if you can afford it, you can do the diagnosis privately, which is about
what would it cost up here?
Say £400 to £600, I would say.
Oh, okay.
Something like that to get the diagnosis, but again, it's a bit of a waiting list. You can choose your provider if you go through the NHS, but you have to be deemed to be in crisis, essentially. So you could do it privately, but then if you wanted to try the medication, you have to do that privately. You can only get it on the NHS if you've had the NHS diagnosis.
Gotcha.
So it's just so, and I think the idea that people are getting overdiagnosed all the time, I don't, how people are waiting so long. It's not an easy thing to actually get diagnosed for. So it's really challenging. And then I think, from my point of view, I really want to look at getting funding to do group coaching for parents of children in schools and things like that. Because
that's great. Would you go into the school? Would it be online, or they come to your practice?
I don't know really. I'm trying to find out the routes of funding initially. So
I think it'd be a very good cause.
And I think the people that I coach. So I coach really great people, business owners, and that's really fantastic. And I love doing that. But I also see this really urgent need of, I see children who are going to be in prison.
You can spot that.
You can see it. You can see it happening in front of you. And I think that is absolutely tragic. Yeah,
it is tragic. It's matched only by it's fascinating, in terms of, I mean that in terms of if you could spot or at least see some of the tells that a young man or young woman could down the line be, or not guaranteed, but be more predisposed to a criminal lifestyle, or if not a criminal lifestyle, then be exposed to a criminal environment where they, through the court of law, end up under Majesty service, at the pleasure. That's interesting, because that alone, Rosie, would be an incredibly valuable service, profession or service, whatever you call it, for someone like yourself to do that, because surely as a caring nation we should want to spot anything that would, but let's face it, prison service is a business. Before anything else, it's actually a business. I knew someone who worked in a prison. It's a business first. It's business, it's housing prisoners. and this comes from America, some of those ideas, those prisoners inside, Western, we're not talking Asia, the Far East or South America, we're talking the USA, Canada, Australia and Europe, they actually work within the prison for less than minimum wage for manufacturing products, you know. So prison itself, before anything else, is a business because people have to get paid. No one goes to work as a warden or a prison officer for free. That building doesn't build itself. Fun fact, did you know Meadowhall Shopping Centre in Sheffield was built as a prison?
Oh, really?
It was built as a prison, and the 11th hour they turned it into a shopping centre, which if you go now, they're kind of one and the same now when you get in there. They don't want you to leave when you go.
No.
Okay, let's look at something whilst towards the end of our discussion. Clearly, your knowledge, profession, experience, and your own personal journey is a huge subject. Okay, and we've just scratched the surface, a grain of sand on the beach, so to speak. Give us let's just go to something that's more less about that. Let me find out something about Rosie. Okay. I like to ask any guests that come on the show, and it gives me another idea about yourself. Okay, what's your go-to movie?
So many, but I think Wolf of Wall Street.
The Wolf of Wall Street. Now, surely you spotted some of those tell signs in Leonardo DiCaprio. Who did he play? Jordan Belfort. I think that was his name in the. I think it was Jordan Belfort, Leonardo DiCaprio in a Martin Scorsese movie. Now that tells us this movie is going to be a visceral experience. Why the Wolf of Wall Street?
I mean, it's just so sort of awfully masculine and all that kind of stuff, but absolutely hilarious. And I think what they're doing with the trading is so neurodivergent. That kind of absolute extreme living.
Everything, because they went on to use pharmaceuticals in the movie as well.
And it's just so well shot, and
it is.
I just find it hilarious. So I
think
love movies anyway, so it's quite hard to choose one. But I think I've watched that quite a lot of times.
That's interesting that you mentioned, Rosie, a film like that, a very, very visceral movie like The Wolf of Wall Street, and you mentioned it's a very masculine movie, and yet the headliner was Margot Robbie, who I happen to like.
But I think the environment in the trading floor and everything
of course it is.
Misogynistic and all that kind of stuff, which is really vulgar, but it's like a Mad Men, that kind of sort of and it's all,
Dan Draper.
Just so exciting and
interesting that it's exciting to you
and all that kind of stuff.
But that's why we go to the movies. Do we go to the movies to fall asleep, or do we go to experience something that either we like or we would like to be part of, but just not fully? That's the whole point of the movies, isn't it? What's your favourite artist, musical artist?
So at the moment I would say it's Moonchild Sinelli.
Who's that?
Moonchild Sinelli. So she's an amazing singer who I saw last year at Shambhala Festival.
Where's she from?
She's from South Africa.
Gotcha, okay.
And I'm going to see her in a couple of weeks in Leeds.
All right, excellent.
And she's also playing again at Shambhala in the summer, so I'm going to see her again.
Oh, so you're a big fan. Moonchild Sinelli.
Moonchild Sinelli.
Okay.
She's amazing.
Well, folk, what, rock, what?
Yes, she's a singer, and she also does loads of collaborations with other people, which is amazing.
Okay.
So amazing vocals,
Holiday destination, where you've been or where you'd like to go?
I think it's always France.
Okay, you like France,
Kayaking in France.
Oh, wow, okay, excellent. So we've got The Wolf of Wall Street, Moonchild Sinelli, kayaking in France. If you could wake up tomorrow morning and you've got a different profession stroke career, okay, spare no expense, what would you be?
Oh, God. What if I didn't, even if I haven't got the skills for it?
You wake up tomorrow and somehow by magic you're trained, experienced.
Probably a chef.
A chef?
Yeah.
Excellent, You seen the movie Chef with John Favreau?
Yeah.
I like that movie, Did you watch last year a programme called The Bear?
Oh, no, but I've heard about that.
I think you like it,
okay.
for a multitude of reasons. We'll talk about that another time, very, very, very good show. With some very good cameos in it as well. But don't Google it because it will spoil it for you. The Bear. All right, now, okay, so you're working in Nottingham, okay, you've worked in Lincoln as well.
Yeah.
Right, tell our viewers, our listeners, so they can hear. We'll put the links in the video as well about where they can find you and what channels or platforms.
So I am ADHD FOCUS, www.adhdfocus.co.uk.
All right.
And I offer coaching for adults with ADHD, diagnosed or not. And I also do workplace training for ADHD awareness and neurodiversity in the workplace training as well.
Excellent.
So I've been to lots of universities, but I also do other organisations as well.
Yeah.
And very interested in like collaborations and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
I've seen that you're regularly on LinkedIn. Some of the work you do with people you work with, and I think actually it's interesting because I would be more than open to. Sometime in the future, if I found that I thought a client may need to actually, a personal training client or a sports massage therapy client may need to at least be open to meeting you or seeing you, okay, for your services. As I've got older, I'm saying you're mid-40s,
45.
Okay, 45, right? I've got 9 years on you, and I can tell you, between 45 and 54, 55 even, that 10-year period, we learn so much more about not just the people that we work with, friends, but ourselves. It never ends either. It is a constant cycle of learning, good and bad, understanding, being reflective, sitting back and reflecting. A good friend of mine used to say to me, Tristan, you need to step back and look at what you've done in your career. And I understood him. He was an academic as well. He'd written papers. And he's also a close friend of mine and a family man as well. Not the guy I mentioned 10 minutes ago, someone else. And he said to me, sometimes take a step back and look at what, I came to Lincoln in 2010 with nothing but my qualifications, which no one cares about. And I thought, well, I want my own profession, my own career. How do I do it? I didn't have the answers. What I did know was I've got to get out of bed, brush my teeth, drink my coffee, and get out into the world and start something. And hence here we are now, 14 and a half, 15 years later. I've met yourself, Rosie, because things always, if they don't go around in cycles, we do get that physiological, emotional, academic, or even business serendipity, where something comes along to us and we think, oh, how did that happen? Where did that good fortune come our way? We have to put ourselves in a position. So if good fortune is out there, it comes our way. There's not this thing about always, about always going out and grabbing it by grabbing things by the neck and whatnot. I do understand that, and to some degree, I do agree with it as well. But I also have learned sometimes to stand back and let things and people come to you, of which I'm sure, in the future, as your profession, your service, and your career expands, they're going to. It takes a lot. I can imagine it takes a lot to do what you do when you're part of it as well. Because there must be some constant questioning of yourself. I have to, an example, I have to eat healthy most of the time. I like a bit of chocolate. I have to train regular, strength training, mobility training, flexibility training. I have to practice what I preach with clients. And of course, you went running this morning, so you clearly look after your health. And again, it goes back to everyone I meet in business, in training, or just personal, exercise, good nutrition and sleep are absolutely paramount to everything that we get involved in, of which there has to be those three factors that come into what you do. Or do you class, is it patients or clients when you're working with clients? Yeah. When did it become a patient? When they see the psychiatric doctor?
I guess so,
yeah. All right, well, I'd like to, at some point in the future, not too distant future, if it's okay with you, Rosie, invite you back in for part 2 of our conversation, because it's clearly, I'm actually interested in it, and I started getting interested in the world of ADHD when I trained a client who had it, a 50-year-old mother, and that's what brought us to this world. All right, and so, okay, well we're going to put this episode on YouTube, LinkedIn, Spotify, Amazon Music, all the socials. And if you'd like to comment, feel free to comment when you listen or see the episode. My thanks goes to Rosie Elvin. Is it pronounced?
Yeah, Elvin.
Elvin.
Yeah.
And we'll put the links to your services in the video as well, in the episode. And of course, you know where to contact Rosie. And I'm sure at some point in the future, our paths, you know, with what we do in business and services can actually can have some kind of, for want of a better word, symbiosis.
Yeah.
All right, so, hang on. So, Wolf of Wall Street, my go-to movie is Alien.
Okay.
Right, now a very masculine, visceral movie, but guess what? Also headlined by Sigourney Weaver.
Yes.
Yeah. Your artist, what was it again?
Moonchild Stanelli.
Well, mine is Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye.
Yeah, okay.
All right. And one of them's still here, by the way. And of course, your destination, did you say south of France or France as a whole?
Yeah, south of France.
Okay.
Yeah.
My destination this year, in October this year, I'm 2 weeks on foot across China.
Wow.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. I did Japan last year, and this year's China. I like all those things, like those far off destinations, to see how other people live and work. It can broaden our horizons, you know.
Amazing.
Let's do it. Rosie, until the next time, I better get on with work, and you better get on with your work as well. That book again, what's it called?
Yeah, so Driven to Distraction by Ed Halliwell.
Ed Halliwell. That's the book to get, and contact Rosie as well. All right, until the next time, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rosie. Pleasure. Bye now.